What would you do if the world demanded your attention, but your breakthrough waited? The clock on the wall hit 8 a.m., but the office remained unnervingly still. Arthur sat at his desk, staring at the mountain of folders that had accumulated by the end of the previous week. Each stack was a monument to tasks he had already finished, yet they felt like lead weights pressing into the laminate surface. He reached for his coffee, but his hand stopped midair. His phone vibrated against the desk, a sharp, metallic buzz that cut through the silence. Another notification. He did not reach for the device. Instead, he watched the screen light up, displaying a header, urgent, client presentation. The phone buzzed again, then a third time, a rhythmic, insistent demand for his attention. He looked away, focusing instead on the dust motes dancing in the sliver of morning light. The inbox icon flickered on his monitor, a small, blinking reminder of the endless stream of reports. He ignored it. He pushed the nearest stack of folders 2 inches to the left. The silence of the room was heavy. He took a breath, held it, and listened to the hum of the ventilation system. He decided, in that moment, that he was done spinning. Arthur ignored the final, persistent buzz of his phone and pushed the device face down onto the blotter. He leaned forward, his chair creaking in the quiet, and pulled the bottom drawer of his desk open. It stuck on the metal runner, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the empty office. He reached past the standard office supplies and gripped the spine of a weathered, leather-bound notebook. It was cold to the touch, a stark contrast to the sterile plastic of his keyboard. He set it on the cleared space of his desk, the cover thick with a fine layer of gray dust. He blew across the surface, watching the particles drift into the morning light. With a steady hand, he flipped to the final page. There it was, a hand-drawn schematic of a clean energy turbine, the lines precise and dark against the yellowing paper. He traced the curvature of the blades with his index finger, feeling the texture of the ink. This was the project that had been shelved for 3 years, a ghost of his own ambition. He pulled a pen from his pocket, clicked the top, and rested the tip against the paper. Arthur ignored the rhythmic hum of the server room down the hall. He focused entirely on the first variable, torque resistance. He pressed the pen hard against the paper, the nib scratching a sharp, jagged line as he calculated the load-bearing capacity of the turbine blades. His mind moved in synchronization with the ink. One equation led to another, each line of math building a foundation for the next. The overhead, fluorescent light flickered, casting a strobe-like shadow across his desk. But he did not blink. He did not look up. He was no longer in a cubicle. He was inside the mechanics of the machine. He scribbled a series of coefficients, crossed them out, and replaced them with more precise values. The air in the room felt heavy, but he was oblivious to the temperature or the silence. Every movement was deliberate, a steady rhythm of thought translated into physical marks. He traced the turbine housing dimensions, checking the stress points against the structural integrity of the core. The flickering light pulsed again, a frantic, artificial heartbeat. He calculated the drag, adjusted for wind shear, and pushed the pen faster. The clerk was gone. The engineer had returned. The first page was just the beginning. Arthur turned the leaf, the paper crisp and clean, and started on the second set of variables. His hand moved with a frantic, controlled energy, filling the white space with dense clusters of numbers and structural diagrams. He was mapping the turbine's internal dynamics, translating abstract physics into a tangible, working model. By the third page, the complexity deepened. He stopped for a split second, his pen hovering over a critical coefficient, then pressed down again with renewed certainty. He was building something that could withstand the forces of nature, and the math was the only thing standing between theory and reality. He flipped to the fourth page. The ink flowed in long, sweeping arcs as he solved for the rotational velocity. He ignored the ping of an incoming email, the vibration of his phone against the desk, and the distant sound of a printer. The world outside the notebook had lost its texture. He was locked in a cycle of inquiry and resolution, his mind racing ahead of his hand. He finished the 4th page, the margins crowded with notes and secondary calculations, and the momentum was absolute. He was no longer just working, he was creating a breakthrough. The silence shattered. Footsteps echoed against the linoleum, sharp and rhythmic, stopping abruptly at the edge of his desk. Arthur did not look up until a heavy stack of papers hit the surface. With a dull, final thud, Sarah stood over him, her shadow stretching across his open notebook. "The client is waiting for the quarterly report," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Arthur finally lifted his gaze. He did not reach for the papers. Instead, he pointed a pen toward his monitor, where the turbine simulation pulsed with complex, shifting data. "The report is secondary," he replied, his voice steady. Sarah looked at the screen, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the intricate geometry of the turbine blades. She looked at the clock on the wall, then back at the monitor, the tension in the room thickening. She waited for him to acknowledge the deadline, to reach for the stack of reports, but Arthur remained motionless. He was not asking for permission. He was stating a priority. The turbine design was the future of the company, and he would not be distracted by the immediate bureaucracy of a quarterly summary. Sarah stared at him, searching for a sign of hesitation, but found none. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving the papers untouched on his desk. Arthur turned back to his screen, the confrontation already fading into the background of his work. The office clock clicked forward to 2. On the monitor, the turbine blades spun in a fluid, golden arc, the simulation nearing its final convergence. Arthur watched the progress bar crawl toward completion, his breath held in his chest. Then, the rhythm shifted. The smooth rotation of the turbine stuttered. A jagged line of code flickered across the bottom of the screen, followed by a sharp, electronic whine that pierced the quiet room. Arthur leaned in, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, but the system moved faster than his reaction. The golden model collapsed into a static mess of wireframes. The entire screen flashed a violent, warning red. Error codes cascaded down the display, each one signaling a breakdown in the structural integrity of the design. The simulation had hit a wall. Hours of intense calculation, the entire foundation of his theory, suddenly dissolved into a sea of red text and failed logic. The hum of the processor slowed to a low, dying drone. Arthur sat back, the glow of the red light reflecting in his eyes. The breakthrough he had been chasing was gone. His professional gamble had hit a dead end, and the silence of the office now felt heavy and suffocating. He stared at the screen, leaving him with nothing but a broken simulation. Arthur did not reach for the mouse. He did not restart the machine. He pulled his weathered notebook closer, the pages crinkling under his touch. He began at the first page, his finger tracing the ink lines of his initial torque calculations. He compared the numbers on the paper to the raw data output, still visible in the terminal window. He moved to the second page, checking the load-bearing coefficients. Then the third. His eyes darted between the handwritten equations and the flickering red lines on the screen. He was looking for a ghost in the machine. He reached the middle of the third page, where the structural load calculations were dense and cramped. He stopped. He ran his pen tip over a specific figure. There it was. A decimal point sat one position to the left of where it belonged. It was a microscopic error, a tiny shift in value. He circled the error with a heavy, dark stroke of his pen. He grabbed his keyboard, ready to force the system to reconcile the truth. Arthur typed the correction with deliberate, steady strokes. He hit the enter key and leaned back, watching the cursor blink in the terminal. The processor hummed, rising in pitch, as it reran the entire structural load analysis. He did not blink. The screen remained dark for a heartbeat. Then the lines of red text vanished. A progress bar appeared, filling slowly from left to right. It hit 50%, then 70, then 90. The fans inside the tower accelerated, a sharp whine filling the silent office. Then, The progress bar turned a vibrant, steady green. The turbine model reappeared on the screen, rotating with perfect, fluid precision. No stutters, no jagged wireframes. The simulation was stable. Arthur exhaled, his shoulders dropping as the tension drained from his frame. He had done it. The core issue that had baffled the entire engineering department for years was finally resolved. He watched the turbine spin. He reached out and closed the notebook, the cover snapping shut with a final sound. The breakthrough was complete. He leaned back in his chair. Arthur sat for a long moment, watching the turbine model spin on his monitor. The screen cast a steady, cool light across his desk, illuminating the scattered papers and the mountain of folders he had ignored all morning. His phone buzzed again, a sharp, insistent vibration against the wood, but he did not reach for it. The emails were still piling up, stacking into a digital wall of demands and deadlines, yet they felt like relics from a different life. He stood up, the chair rolling back against the carpet with a soft, final thud. His back ached, a dull reminder of the hours spent hunched over his notes, but the weight in his chest had vanished. He reached down and grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. He did not look at the quarterly reports Sarah had left earlier. He did not check the inbox. He walked toward the office door, his footsteps echoing in the empty, silent room. He paused at the threshold, his hand resting on the cold metal of the handle. He looked back one last time at the glowing screen, the green light of the simulation proving that he had achieved more in a single day than the rest of the team had in a month. He pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway. The air in the corridor felt different, lighter, as he walked away from the desk, leaving the unfinished reports and the corporate grind behind him. He did not look back again.